The most dangerous person in the room is usually the quietest one. Not because they are stronger, louder, or more aggressive, but because while everyone else is reacting emotionally, trying to impress people, speaking too much, and exposing their weaknesses without realizing it, the silent person is observing everything. Most people never understand how powerful silence truly is until they completely lose emotional control in front of someone who remains calm no matter what happens. Silence is not weakness. In reality, silence has become one of the strongest forms of psychological power in modern society because silence creates uncertainty, and uncertainty makes people uncomfortable. The moment people cannot read your emotions clearly, they begin creating stories about you inside their own mind. They start wondering what you are thinking, why you are so calm, why you did not react, and why you seem emotionally unaffected. That is where psychological power begins. Most people were conditioned to believe that power belongs to the loudest person in the room, the person constantly speaking, constantly explaining themselves, constantly trying to prove their value to others. But emotionally disciplined individuals understand something most people never learn. The less you reveal, the more difficult you become to control. In today's world, where people constantly overshare their emotions, frustrations, insecurities, and personal lives online every single day, silence immediately separates you from the crowd. Silence communicates emotional discipline. It communicates confidence. It communicates self-control. And emotional control is extremely rare. If you enjoy content about psychological power, emotional discipline, silent confidence, and human behavior, subscribe to Psychology of Silence and leave a like on this video, because understanding the psychology behind silence can completely change the way people see you and the way you move through life. Most people speak too much because they are uncomfortable with silence. Silence forces people to confront themselves. That is why nervous people over-explain, emotionally weak people react instantly, and insecure people constantly seek validation through words. The average person cannot handle stillness because stillness removes distraction, and when distraction disappears, insecurity becomes visible. This is why calm individuals often intimidate people without even trying. Not because they are threatening, but because they remain emotionally controlled while everyone else loses composure. Human beings constantly search for emotional reactions during conversations. People expect responses, validation, anger, frustration, or excitement. But when someone stays calm, unreadable, and emotionally balanced, it creates psychological tension. And tension creates attention. That is why quiet people are often observed more than loud people. Their silence creates mystery, and mystery naturally attracts curiosity. Notice how the loudest people in a room slowly become background noise while the calm observer somehow controls attention without speaking much at all. This happens because words lose value when they are used constantly. People who speak less often carry more weight socially because every word feels intentional. Powerful individuals rarely rush to explain themselves because they understand that over-explaining weakens presence. The moment you constantly justify yourself to others, you unconsciously communicate insecurity. Insecure people always feel the need to prove themselves. Emotionally strong people do not. They remain calm under pressure, especially under pressure. One of the clearest signs of emotional weakness is reacting too quickly. The moment someone criticizes them, ignores them, disrespects them, or challenges their ego, they immediately react emotionally, and in that exact moment they lose psychological control. Emotional reactions reveal information. The more reactive you are, the easier you become to manipulate because people quickly learn your emotional triggers, your insecurities, and your weaknesses. But calm individuals are difficult to manipulate because they do not immediately reveal what affects them. They pause. They observe. They think before speaking. And that silence creates pressure on everyone around them. In many situations, Silence during conflict is more powerful than arguments because arguments reveal emotion while silence reveals control. Deep down, people respect emotional control far more than emotional intensity. This is why some individuals naturally command respect the moment they enter a room. Not because they seek attention, but because their presence feels controlled. Their emotions feel stable. Their energy feels disciplined. And stability creates authority, especially in a world where emotional impulsiveness has become normal. Most people spend their lives reacting emotionally to everything around them, reacting online, reacting in conversations, reacting to criticism, reacting without thinking. But the individual who remains calm while others lose control automatically appears psychologically stronger because calmness under pressure signals inner power, and people instinctively respect inner power. The frightening truth is that most people expose themselves every single day through unnecessary reactions, emotional conversations, and constant explanations while the silent observer continues learning everything about everyone around them. Silence sharpens observation. When you stop trying to dominate every conversation, you begin noticing things most people completely miss. Insecurity, jealousy, manipulation, hidden intentions, emotional instability, and weakness disguised as confidence. That is why silence is not passive. Silence is strategic. It protects your emotions, your energy, your focus, and most importantly, it prevents other people from controlling your emotional state because once someone controls your emotions, they control you. The people who understand this move differently. They speak intentionally, react slowly, observe constantly, and never feel the need to reveal everything about themselves. While everyone else keeps exposing themselves through noise, they continue building silent power. Most people never realize how predictable they become when they cannot control their emotions. Every emotional reaction becomes information for the people around them. The moment someone gets angry too quickly, defensive too quickly, offended too quickly, or desperate for attention too quickly, they immediately reveal their psychological weak points without noticing it. Emotionally intelligent individuals understand this very well, which is why they rarely react impulsively. They know that calmness gives them an advantage because while emotional people are busy expressing themselves, calm people are busy studying them. And the person who observes more than they speak will always understand the room better than everyone else. This is why silence can completely shift social dynamics. The less emotionally reactive you become, the more difficult people find it to influence you. Most individuals are controlled by external circumstances. Their mood changes depending on how others treat them, what people say about them, how much validation they receive, or whether they feel accepted socially. But psychologically disciplined people operate differently. They build internal stability instead of depending on external approval. That is why silence often creates a powerful presence. A person who remains emotionally centered in stressful situations automatically appears stronger than someone who constantly reacts to every little thing around them. People naturally test emotional boundaries all the time. Sometimes consciously, sometimes unconsciously. They observe how quickly you lose patience, how easily you become frustrated, how desperately you seek attention, and how emotionally dependent you are on validation. Most people fail these tests because they cannot control their impulses. They feel the need to defend themselves immediately, explain themselves immediately, or prove themselves immediately. But silence disrupts those expectations. Silence removes emotional access. And when people no longer have easy access to your emotions, they lose a certain level of control over you. This is also why mysterious individuals tend to attract more attention socially. Human beings are naturally curious about what they cannot fully understand. When someone constantly reveals everything about themselves, there is no psychological tension left, no mystery, no curiosity. But when someone remains emotionally composed, speaks selectively, and reveals little about their inner world, people instinctively begin paying closer attention. They start analyzing every word, every expression, and every action because the human mind naturally obsesses over what feels emotionally unavailable or difficult to read. Most people completely underestimate the power of emotional restraint. They believe strength means dominance through aggression, loudness, or intimidation. But true psychological strength often appears calm, patient, and controlled. Some of the most dangerous individuals in history were not emotionally explosive people. They were disciplined observers, strategic thinkers, individuals capable of controlling themselves under pressure while everyone around them collapsed emotionally. Because self-control is one of the rarest forms of power a person can develop. The modern world rewards impulsiveness. People are encouraged to constantly react, constantly share opinions, constantly seek attention, and constantly prove themselves online. Silence almost feels unnatural now because society conditions people to believe visibility equals value. But psychologically, people who constantly seek attention often reveal deep emotional insecurity. They need external recognition to feel important. Calm individuals do not chase attention because they understand something extremely important. Real power does not need to announce itself constantly. That is why silent confidence feels different from arrogance. Arrogant people try to appear powerful. Quiet individuals simply are. Arrogance is usually loud because it depends on external recognition. But true confidence is often silent because it comes from internal certainty. A person who genuinely respects themselves does not feel the need to dominate every conversation or convince everyone of their value. Their presence speaks before they do, and people can feel that energy immediately. This is also why emotionally controlled individuals are often underestimated at first. Loud people attract immediate attention because noise captures focus quickly. But over time, people begin recognizing patterns. They notice who stays calm during pressure, who thinks before speaking, who remains emotionally stable during conflict, who does not seek validation constantly. And eventually, those individuals become the most respected people in the room because consistency creates trust while emotional instability destroys it. Silence also gives you something most people never develop: clarity. When your mind is not constantly consumed by emotional reactions, unnecessary drama, and endless noise, you begin seeing situations more objectively. You notice manipulation faster. You recognize emotional games faster. You understand intentions more clearly. Emotional people often become trapped inside their own reactions, but calm people see the entire situation from above because they are not blinded by temporary emotion. That is why silence is deeply connected to discipline. A person who can control their words can eventually control their emotions. A person who can control their emotions can eventually control their decisions. And a person who controls their decisions controls the direction of their life. Most people destroy opportunities, relationships, and respect simply because they lacked emotional discipline during critical moments. One impulsive reaction can expose years of weakness in seconds. But disciplined individuals understand that not every emotion deserves expression, and not every situation deserves a reaction. There is also a reason why emotionally mature people become more selective with their words as they grow older. Experience teaches them that constant explanations rarely change people. Most individuals already see reality through their own emotions, insecurities, and assumptions. Trying to constantly defend yourself or explain yourself to everyone becomes exhausting and meaningless. That is why emotionally intelligent people often conserve their energy instead of wasting it on unnecessary conflict. They know peace is more valuable than winning meaningless arguments. And perhaps the most powerful thing about silence is that it forces people to reveal themselves first. When you speak less, people naturally fill the empty space themselves. They talk more, reveal more, expose more. Most individuals cannot tolerate silence for long periods, so they unconsciously begin exposing their insecurities, intentions, fears, and emotional state without realizing it. Meanwhile, the silent observer continues gathering information calmly. This alone creates an enormous psychological advantage in social situations because information is power, and silence often gives you more information than words ever will. The truth is that silence changes the way people perceive you because human beings naturally associate emotional control with strength. When someone remains calm in situations where most people would react impulsively, it immediately creates a different level of respect. Even people who dislike emotionally disciplined individuals often feel uncomfortable around them because they cannot easily predict or influence them. Predictability creates vulnerability. The more emotionally predictable you are, the easier it becomes for others to manipulate your behavior, your attention, and even your decisions. But silence interrupts predictability. It creates distance between emotion and reaction, and that distance is where psychological control is built. Most people live in a permanent state of emotional exposure. Their face reveals everything. Their words reveal everything. Their reactions reveal everything. They constantly give people access to their emotional state without realizing the consequences of it. But emotionally intelligent individuals understand that not every feeling needs to be expressed publicly. Sometimes silence protects your peace more than explanations ever will. Sometimes silence protects your dignity. And sometimes silence prevents you from making decisions you would regret later. This becomes especially important during moments of conflict. Weak-minded people often confuse emotional intensity with strength. They believe raising their voice, reacting aggressively, or trying to dominate emotionally makes them powerful. But in reality, emotional impulsiveness usually signals a lack of internal control. Truly disciplined people rarely lose themselves emotionally because they understand that once emotions take control, logic disappears. And when logic disappears, people become easy to manipulate. This is why calmness during pressure feels intimidating to many people. It disrupts emotional expectations. Most individuals expect emotional reactions because that is what they are used to seeing everywhere. They expect anger, frustration, desperation, insecurity, or emotional defensiveness. But when someone remains composed under pressure, it creates psychological imbalance in the other person. Suddenly, they no longer feel emotionally in control of the interaction. And the moment someone realizes they cannot emotionally affect you easily, their perception of you changes immediately. Silence also increases self-awareness. The more time you spend observing instead of constantly reacting, the more clearly you begin understanding your own emotions, patterns, insecurities, and weaknesses. Most people never truly understand themselves because they spend their entire lives distracted by noise, stimulation, social validation, and endless emotional reactions. But silence forces reflection. It forces awareness. And awareness is uncomfortable for people who avoid confronting themselves honestly. That is why disciplined silence often leads to emotional growth. You begin recognizing how much unnecessary energy most people waste trying to impress others, defend their ego, or seek approval. You realize that many social interactions are driven by insecurity rather than confidence. Some people talk constantly because they fear being ignored. Some people seek attention because they fear feeling invisible. Some people dominate conversations because silence makes them anxious. Once you understand this, human behavior starts becoming extremely predictable. And the more predictable human behavior becomes to you, the more detached you become from emotional chaos. You stop reacting to everything personally. You stop feeling the need to win every argument. You stop wasting energy proving yourself to people who have already decided how they want to see you. Emotional maturity teaches you that silence often says more than endless explanations ever could. There is a reason powerful individuals throughout history valued restraint so highly. Restraint requires discipline. Anyone can react emotionally. Anyone can lose control. Anyone can speak impulsively when emotions rise. Few people can remain composed when they feel challenged emotionally. Very few people can stay calm when their ego feels attacked. Very few people can control their mouth when anger takes over. And because this level of discipline is rare, people instinctively admire it when they see it. Silence also protects focus. The modern world constantly fights for your attention. Every platform, every conversation, every opinion, every distraction pulls people away from themselves. Most individuals live mentally exhausted because their mind is constantly reacting to external noise. But quiet people often preserve their mental energy differently. They avoid unnecessary drama. They avoid emotional chaos. They choose carefully where their attention goes because they understand attention is one of the most valuable forms of power a person possesses. What makes silence even more powerful is that it forces people to reveal their true nature over time. When you stop interrupting people with your own emotions and opinions, you begin seeing who they really are beneath the surface. You notice who becomes uncomfortable without validation. You notice who constantly seeks control. You notice who becomes emotional when they cannot influence you. And you begin understanding that many people are not truly confident at all. They are simply loud enough to hide their insecurity temporarily. This is why quiet confidence feels so rare today. Most people are addicted to external stimulation and emotional reactions. Silence feels uncomfortable to them because silence removes distraction, and distraction often protects people from confronting themselves honestly. But disciplined individuals slowly become comfortable with stillness. They learn how to sit with their thoughts without needing constant noise. And that ability alone creates a level of emotional stability that most people never reach. Over time, silence becomes more than a social strategy. It becomes a form of self-mastery. You begin choosing your words carefully. You stop reacting impulsively. You stop giving people unlimited emotional access to you. You become more observant, more patient, and more aware of the psychological dynamics happening around you. While emotionally reactive people continue exposing themselves through impulsive behavior, calm individuals continue building influence quietly because they understand something most people never will. Real power is often invisible at first. One of the biggest reasons silence feels so powerful is because it gives you emotional independence. Most people unknowingly become controlled by the opinions, reactions, and validation of others because their emotional state depends entirely on external approval. If people praise them, they feel confident. If people criticize them, they feel insecure. If people ignore them, they feel worthless. Their emotions constantly move according to the behavior of everyone around them. But emotionally disciplined individuals slowly break free from this cycle because silence teaches them how to remain grounded without needing constant reassurance from the outside world. And the moment someone no longer depends emotionally on external validation, they immediately become more difficult to influence. That is why emotionally independent people often appear calm even in uncomfortable situations. Their stability comes from within, not from the reactions of the crowd. Most people cannot understand this because they were conditioned to constantly seek approval socially. They measure their value based on attention, recognition, popularity, or acceptance. But true psychological strength begins when a person becomes comfortable with not being understood by everyone. This is also why silence creates a certain type of fear in emotionally reactive individuals. They cannot easily read someone who stays composed, and human beings naturally fear what they cannot predict. Loud people are easy to understand because they reveal themselves constantly. Their emotions are visible. Their intentions are obvious. Their reactions are immediate. But quiet individuals create uncertainty because they do not immediately expose what they think or feel. And uncertainty naturally creates tension inside the minds of other people. That tension becomes even stronger when someone remains calm during emotional situations. Most individuals expect emotional reciprocity. If they become angry, they expect anger back. If they become emotional, they expect emotional energy returned. But silence interrupts this emotional exchange completely. It removes the emotional fuel that reactive people unconsciously depend on. And without that emotional feedback, many individuals begin losing control of themselves because they no longer know how to influence the interaction psychologically. This is why silence often wins conflicts that words cannot. Not because silence magically solves problems, but because silence prevents emotional escalation. Reactive individuals often destroy themselves through impulsive words spoken during emotional moments. One uncontrolled reaction can damage relationships, opportunities, reputations, and respect instantly. But disciplined people understand that temporary emotions should never control permanent decisions. They know that remaining calm during emotional pressure is one of the greatest forms of self-control a human being can develop. Silence also reveals who genuinely respects you and who only respects emotional access to you. Some people become uncomfortable the moment they realize they cannot easily control your emotions anymore. They become frustrated when you stop over-explaining yourself. They become irritated when you stop reacting impulsively. They become confused when their emotional tactics no longer affect you. And that confusion exposes their true intentions very quickly because emotionally manipulative people rely heavily on reactions to maintain influence over others. The frightening reality is that most social environments reward emotional impulsiveness without people noticing it. Individuals are encouraged to constantly express every feeling immediately, react instantly to everything they dislike, and publicly expose their emotional state at all times. But psychologically, this creates emotional weakness over time because people slowly lose the ability to regulate themselves internally. They become addicted to expression instead of discipline, addicted to attention instead of awareness, addicted to noise instead of clarity. Meanwhile, the silent observer develops something far more valuable: emotional endurance. The ability to remain composed under pressure. The ability to think clearly while others panic emotionally. The ability to observe situations objectively instead of becoming consumed by temporary feelings. This level of control changes every area of life because emotional discipline affects decisions, relationships, focus, confidence, leadership, and even the way other people perceive your presence socially. There is a reason calm individuals often appear naturally authoritative without trying too hard. Human beings instinctively trust emotional stability more than emotional chaos. People may be entertained temporarily by loud personalities, but deep respect usually goes toward those who remain balanced under pressure. Stability creates safety psychologically, and individuals who control themselves emotionally automatically appear more reliable, more mature, and more powerful in the eyes of others. Over time, silence begins transforming the way you interact with the world completely. You stop wasting energy on meaningless arguments. You stop explaining yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. You stop reacting emotionally to every opinion, criticism, or provocation. And as this emotional discipline grows, something interesting begins happening. Your presence becomes stronger even when you say less. Because presence is not built through constant talking. Presence is built through emotional control, awareness, and certainty. Some people walk into a room and immediately demand attention through noise. Others walk into a room quietly and somehow shift the entire atmosphere without speaking much at all. The difference is psychological. One seeks validation externally. The other already possesses internal stability. And internal stability is extremely rare today. Most people are mentally restless, emotionally reactive, constantly distracted, constantly stimulated, constantly searching for something outside themselves to feel complete. But silence slowly reconnects people with themselves again. It teaches patience, awareness, observation, emotional restraint. And these qualities slowly separate disciplined individuals from emotionally impulsive ones over time. That is why silence is far more than simply speaking less. Silence is the ability to remain emotionally grounded while chaos surrounds you. It is the ability to protect your peace without needing to prove yourself constantly. It is the ability to observe human behavior without immediately becoming emotionally consumed by it. And once a person develops this level of emotional control, their entire presence changes. They become calmer, sharper, more intentional, and far more difficult for the world to manipulate emotionally. Most people spend their entire lives chasing control over external situations without ever learning how to control themselves internally. They try controlling other people's opinions, controlling outcomes, controlling how they are perceived socially. But the truth is that none of those things create real power. Real power begins when a person learns how to remain emotionally stable regardless of what happens around them. And silence becomes one of the clearest signs of that stability because silence forces patience, observation, and emotional restraint at the same time. A person who cannot control their words usually cannot control their emotions either. And a person who cannot control their emotions becomes vulnerable to manipulation everywhere they go. Society constantly rewards emotional impulsiveness because impulsive people are easier to influence. They react faster. They think less. They make emotional decisions. They allow temporary feelings to control permanent actions. But emotionally disciplined individuals move differently. They create space between emotion and reaction. And inside that space, intelligence begins to replace impulse. This is why silent people often appear mentally stronger than others. Not because they never feel emotion, but because they are not controlled by every emotion they feel. That is an enormous difference. Weak individuals believe strength means never feeling fear, frustration, anger, or sadness. But true emotional strength means experiencing emotions without becoming enslaved by them. It means maintaining clarity while others become consumed by emotional chaos. It means protecting your peace instead of sacrificing it for temporary reactions. And perhaps that is why silence feels so uncomfortable to emotionally reactive people. Silence reflects energy back at them. It forces them to sit with their own thoughts, insecurities, impatience, and emotional instability. Many people use constant talking, distraction, and stimulation to escape themselves psychologically. They fear stillness because stillness exposes what noise was hiding. But disciplined individuals slowly become comfortable with silence because they understand that growth requires self-awareness, and self-awareness can only develop when a person stops running from themselves internally. Over time, silence begins changing your entire perception of people. You start noticing how much weakness hides behind excessive talking. You notice how many individuals constantly seek validation through attention. You notice how quickly emotionally unstable people expose themselves when they feel ignored, challenged, or emotionally disconnected. And the more observant you become, the more you realize that human behavior follows patterns. Most people repeat the same emotional cycles every day without ever recognizing them. This is why observation becomes such a powerful social advantage. People reveal themselves constantly through small details: tone of voice, emotional reactions, impulsive decisions, body language, facial expressions, and the desperate need to be understood by everyone around them. But most individuals miss these signals because they are too busy talking, reacting, and trying to control how they appear socially. Meanwhile, the silent observer sees everything quietly. That awareness creates a completely different type of confidence. Not loud confidence, not performative confidence, but grounded confidence. The kind of confidence that does not need to prove itself constantly. Because when a person truly understands themselves, they stop depending emotionally on the approval of others. They stop needing constant validation to feel secure internally. And that emotional independence changes the way they move through life entirely. People can feel that energy immediately, even if they cannot explain it logically. There is something naturally intimidating about a person who remains calm while everyone else becomes emotional. Something powerful about someone who does not chase attention, does not seek approval desperately, and does not lose control under pressure. That type of individual feels different because emotional discipline itself is rare. Most people lose themselves emotionally the moment life becomes uncomfortable. But disciplined individuals remain centered even during uncertainty. And uncertainty reveals character faster than comfort ever will. Anyone can appear calm when life is easy. Anyone can appear confident when everything goes according to plan. But pressure exposes emotional truth. Pressure reveals who controls themselves and who is controlled by their emotions. This is why difficult moments become psychological tests. Some people collapse emotionally under pressure while others become calmer, sharper, and more focused. And the difference almost always comes down to emotional discipline. Silence strengthens that discipline because silence teaches patience. It teaches awareness. It teaches control over impulsive reactions. The more comfortable a person becomes with silence, the less desperate they become for attention, validation, or emotional control over others. They begin operating from internal certainty instead of external approval. And once someone reaches that level psychologically, manipulation becomes much harder because emotionally independent people are extremely difficult to control. This is also why silence protects energy so effectively. Every emotional reaction costs mental energy. Every unnecessary argument drains focus. Every impulsive response weakens clarity. Most people waste enormous amounts of emotional energy every single day reacting to things that do not truly matter. But emotionally disciplined individuals become selective. Selective with their words. Selective with their emotions. Selective with where they invest their attention. Because they understand something most people never realize. Attention is power, and where you place your attention shapes your entire psychological state. The modern world constantly fights for emotional reactions because emotional people are easier to influence. Fear spreads faster through emotional minds. Anger spreads faster through emotional minds. Validation spreads faster through emotional minds. But calm individuals disrupt this cycle because they think before reacting. They observe before judging. They detach before responding emotionally. And that level of restraint creates freedom internally. Eventually, silence becomes more than a strategy. It becomes part of your identity. You no longer feel the need to explain yourself constantly. You no longer feel emotionally shaken by every opinion. You no longer chase acceptance from people who do not understand your value. Instead, you become more focused, more observant, and more intentional with your energy. And ironically, the less attention you seek, the more presence you naturally develop. Because true presence is not loud. True presence is felt. And the people who understand the psychology of silence understand something most of the world never will. The strongest mind in the room is often the calmest one. If this video spoke to you, comment "Silence wins" below. I want to know who truly understands the power of emotional control and silent strength. And if you made it this far, you already think differently from most people.